It's the way I thought we were recording and we were not. I'm like over salivating today. Count the times where I say incredible, phenomenal, fantastic, loved in this video. Way too many times. Hello greeting friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Melanie and today I am here with some YA books I think you should read. Some young adult novels that I personally recommend you reading. I believe I have a list of 10 young adult novels from all different realms. We have some mystery books, we've got some thrillers, we've got some romance, some contemporary, we've got one fantasy, which is super odd. As you guys know, fantasy is the genre that I read in the most, but today's book recommendations are mostly comprised of everything else but fantasy. I know, who is she? You guys are constantly asking me for YA book recommendations, so I thought it would be super nice for me to like actually sit down and craft a list of the top 10 I would recommend outside of fantasy. Now, I know everyone is not a fantasy reader, so I truly wanted to have a well-rounded list with a little bit of everything that could appeal to a lot more people. So today we have the top 10 books to read in the young adult category, YA books if you will. If you have yet to subscribe to my channel, don't forget to do so down below for more bookish content. I am constantly uploading videos that I'm sure you do not want to miss. I am also live streaming throughout the week doing my weekly reading sprint, and you can also follow me on all of my social medias. I have an Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Amazon wish list, and a coffee. Everything is linked down below. You guys know the drill. And yeah, without a further ado, let's get right into some YA books I personally think you should read. All right, people, let's get crack-a-lacking over here. I made a list of my top 10 YA books that I have read more recently that I think you should be reading too. I also sprinkled in 2 graphic novels that I personally love. I have been reading YA for what feels like the longest portion of my life. I don't think I'll ever stop reading YA. I think the age group has a lot to offer. Let's start with the first one. Okay, so this first one just makes me very giddy on the inside whenever I think about it. This is the one that I read the most recently. I'm kidding. This is not the one that I have read the most recently, but this is one of the ones that I have read the most recently. But I am talking about Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. Now, yes, I have finally read Heartstopper, at least volume 1 and volume 2. I really want to get volume 3. I need to know how this story continues. I also know Heartstopper has like its own little moment in prose form called Nick and Charlie, which follows the 2 main characters, and I honestly really want to get that as well. So in Heartstopper, we follow Nick and Charlie as they meet and they form this very wholesome friendship. And we see all that friendship becomes throughout the months and how that friendship slowly starts becoming something a little bit more romantic. It does kind of evolve from like friendship to kind of like a gray area to then a little bit more of a romantic relationship. And this deals a lot with embracing yourself, disregarding other people's opinions and views on yourself, because how you view yourself is what matters the most. And it deals a lot with sexuality and coming out, and again embracing your truest self no matter how that comes, and not fitting yourself into a box just because society says that you need to. So these graphic novels definitely embody all of that. It was such a wholesome moment. I think that's the best way that I can explain Nick and Charlie's relationship. And the illustrations in here were also absolutely incredible. I loved them. I think particularly with Charlie, I found some of the illustrations when he was in a little bit more of a sad place, a little bit more of a hopeless state of mind, if you will. I found myself tearing up in those moments and really feeling for Charlie and his character and his arc and his story. And I feel that is kind of hard to do with a graphic novel, but I found myself feeling all of those things and more. I did not think I would enjoy these so much, but now I'm like, I need everything. I need all of Nick and Charlie, like ASAP. Let's talk about the only fantasy I have in this list. Yes, the only fantasy. Who is she? We do have one magical realism in here, but this is the only actual fantasy, and it is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Now, this book is very talked about now on Booktube, or at least I feel the people that I watch have been giving this book a lot of love ever since it came out. This book, for a YA fantasy dealing with Arthurian mythology, was everything that you would expect, and it delivered even more than that. In this one, we follow Bree as she enters a college-age program after her mother's death. She is not college age. In fact, Bree is 16, so she is kind of immersing herself into a more adult world, even though she is not an adult herself. And she goes there as an escape, again, after her mother's death, trying to find herself. And on her very first night on campus, she actually is witness of a magical attack that she is obviously not meant to witness. In fact, she is not meant to be able to see this at all. So this secret society called the Legendborn really take attention to her and really start trying to figure out exactly who she is, how she is able to see these things that, again, she's not meant to be seeing. So once she finds out about the secret society, she will go into said secret society, and she finds out that it's a little bit more complicated than she first expected because it is tied to the fantastical Arthurian mythologies that we have all heard about since we were very young, and this is somehow connected to her mother's death. So Bree will take it upon herself to really immerse herself into this society and find out exactly how these absolute strangers, this absolute mystery, is connected to her mother's death. I think this particular book, after I found of its existence and then I read it, really sparked my interest for anything related to Arthurian mythology. When I was really young, I was very interested in it and then I fell out of it. But knowing that there's books like this now in YA that delve into that topic that has been a classic for such a long time definitely sparked my interest a lot more into exploring this kind of subgenre, sub-subgenre, I guess you could call it. Not only does it create its own world revolving all of that, but it also includes a lot of themes that I was personally not expecting, and manages to include themes as far as race and racism, systemic racism, and how in particular Bree feels like she does not fit into this secret society that has been going on for years, and she still feels like an outsider even though she is meant to belong. Tracy Deon's writing is also fantastic. Like, ever since you start with the prologue, you are just in awe of her writing. I found myself underlining, highlighting, annotated right from page 1. I find that is some of my favorite things about this book. The plot twist was also incredible. I need book 2. I need to know how the story will progress after this, but I just found this to be such a thrilling fantasy, and I'd expect nothing less out of swords and mythos and Arthurian mythology, King Arthur. Now, would it be a video of mine if I was talking about YA book recommendations and I did not mention Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson? The answer is no, it wouldn't be, because this is some of the best thriller books that I have ever read, and the fact that this is YA makes it even more incredible. I often find myself questioning whether YA thrillers are good or not, but I have 2 in particular in this list that make me really answer yes, they are worth it and yes, they are good, and one of them is the entire Truly Devious trilogy. Now, if you're a fan of thrillers, dark academia vibes, if you are into a murder mystery, a cold case, if you're into those Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie vibes, but in YA, that is what Truly Devious is. In Truly Devious, we follow Stevie Bell, who is a true crime aficionado. That is what she wants to do for a living. She has very much looked up to these fictional characters such as Sherlock Holmes, and she has admired the works of Agatha Christie for as long as she can remember, and she again wants to do that for a living, so she truly sees an opportunity when she gets invited to Ellingham Academy. Ellingham Academy is this very prestigious school. It is invite only. Everything is paid for you if you do accept to go. And again, she sees an opportunity because there is a cold case surrounding this school where 80 years in the past, the daughter and wife of the founder were kidnapped and found dead, and the case was never really solved. So Stevie, being Stevie, because there's no other explanation for it, sees it upon herself to go to this school, crack the case open, and hopefully close it for good. Except there is a lot more factors going into this investigation. Truly Devious is making a comeback present time, kids are dying present time, and the answers are a lot more convoluted than Stevie ever thought possible. Gotta admit, it creeped me out, which I find is super hard to do because YA thrillers are usually, or at least in my perspective, kind of underwhelming. It definitely felt darker in tone even for a YA, which is why I'd categorize this as a mildly dark academia for YA. Definitely gives you like that adult vibe that the college setting would, but they are still in high school. Creepy letters are being handed around, so if you want those creepy vibes, if you want that ongoing investigation for the span of 3 books, that is definitely a bingeable story. Truly Devious is definitely the way to go. The next one is one that I did via audiobook, and this audiobook not only did it hit you right on the feels, but it was also narrated by the author, which is one of my favorite things to experience, and it is The Black Flamingo by Dean Ada, which which is written in verse, so it does add a little bit more of a poetic feel to it. And in this one, we follow Michael as he is trying to embrace himself as a mixed-race boy. He is half Jamaican, half Greek, and as he is trying to also embrace his sexuality and what exactly it means to him. We follow him all the way from his childhood and him figuring out how to break out of this mold that society has made out of masculinity and exactly what you need to do to be masculine and to be a man, and all of the things that he is aspiring and wanting and yearning outside of that. And we follow him from there all the way up to his college years when he enrolls in his first year of college and he finds a very cathartic, fierce way to express himself through drag, and that is now very liberating to him as a young adult. This story definitely explores a lot of different avenues about sexuality, discovering yourself, embracing yourself, again, no matter what society is telling you, no matter what mold they're trying to fit you in, no matter what the people surrounding you are saying. And it was such a beautiful journey to go alongside Michael, especially because the book was written in verse. It was such a quick-witted string of words that went by extremely quickly, which made the journey even more exciting. And it was both heartbreaking and hopeful to see Michael go throughout his entire life trying to find himself, trying to find a place where he fit in, and all of his dating experiences. It was just a roller coaster of emotions, all in the best way possible. And it definitely was a celebration of youth and love and queerness. I just absolutely adored the Black Flamingo, like so freaking much. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Never Look Back by Lilian Rivera. This is a Latinx novel and it is an Orpheus and Eurydice retelling. So for those of you who find yourselves enjoying a lot of Greek mythology, a lot of Greek retellings, then this is definitely the route to go. And in this one, we follow two Afro-Puerto Ricanos after the events of Hurricane Maria, and we follow particularly Yuri as she comes to the Bronx as a very haunted girl. She brings with herself a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, a lot of darkness that has been again haunting her since she was very, very young. And as a result to that, by meeting Fias, which is the male love interest, he, as the myth would tell you, is trying to save her and to take all of that baggage that he has and liberate her from everything that has been haunting her for her entire life. But it never is that simple, because with Yuri comes a very dark entity that is trying to take over her and her life, and Fios will attempt his hardest just to save her from that darkness that follows. So if you read this, you'll be able to spot very, very quickly how the Greek mythology aspect of it is incorporated into this particular story. I think what I enjoyed the most with this one was not only the writing, which at times felt very lyrical and poetic. That was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. But I think what made this even more exciting were all of those Latinx references. And to see all those small nuances that Lilian Rivera included in this one, I think particularly with Fias, he is a bachata singer in this one. And again, Yuri is very much Puerto Riqueña, so you can see all of those cultural references woven into the story very easily. I think it made it very exciting. And the writing again in this one was just fantastic. I think the romance itself, given the story, given the origin of Orpheus and Eurydice, was very heartbreaking, but there was still a lot of hope in the story. I definitely was feeling all of the emotions towards like the last third of the book. We have Charming as a Verb by Ben Philippe, which I read this book before it came out. I read an arc of it. Absolutely incredible story. I also have a full review up for this if you want to check it out. I will leave it linked down below. But in this one, we follow Henry Haltiwanger, who is a very popular kid and star debater at his private school. And Henry has always had this big dream for himself to go to Columbia University, get his degree, have a very successful career, and that is what he is striving towards. That's why he has all of his extracurricular activities. That is why he has his own dog walking business, which is kind of a scam in a way. And he is constantly working hard towards that goal to save as much money as he can so that he can afford college. And it all gets a little complicated when you insert Corinne Troy, which is our female lead in this book. And once she finds the truth behind Henry's dog walking business, she approaches him and she tells him, I know it's kind of a scam, and if you don't want me to tell anyone, you need to help me become cool, because Corinne is what you'd call like that pushy girl, that overbearing girl, overachieving perfectionist girl, the classic view that teenagers have towards very driven women. And so she essentially blackmails him into helping her become more popular at school. I think what I enjoyed so much with Charming as a Verb in particular was all of the talk behind what a kid has planned out for themselves when you are in high school and they are making all of their college plans versus exactly what your parents expect of you. And I think in this particular case, the conversation was so interesting because Henry's parents are immigrants. So the conversation was a little bit different and it had a lot of weight to it. You could tell that a lot of it was so heavy on Henry's mind because he was trying to follow his own path while still pleasing his parents, because his parents had so many expectations on what he should be doing and should be achieving, because they do not want Henry to follow the same path that they did when they were younger. And so I think that whole dynamic made the story a lot more complex, and that is why I enjoyed it so much, because it was not as simple as a kid going to school. There were a lot of other factors going into that particular dilemma. It also talked a lot about your choice with college, what path you should take, and that conversation itself was also so interesting. And I think particularly for young people out there who are just now trying to figure out what they want to study, this book would be really helpful because that whole application process was really realistic. I found myself often comparing my own experience with applying to college when I was 17, 18 versus what happened in the book. The side characters in this book were also incredible. Like, I found myself laughing with them, laughing at them. They were just incredibly crafted characters, and they were all so relatable to people that you could potentially have in your own personal life. And in addition to all of that, before I forget, because this just came into my mind, it also just includes so many themes that I found myself nodding along. Themes about race and racism again, and systemic racism in particular, and class and privilege, and how the admissions process for college is so much different to people of color versus white folk. And that part of the book was just written so incredibly well, and found myself nodding to a lot of things that Ben Philippe was establishing throughout the book. The next one we have is another one that I read in January and I absolutely adored, and that is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. The audiobook, if you are an audiobook person, please listen to this damned audiobook, because Alaska Jackson's narrating skills are S tier, top tier, God tier, however you want to call it. Alaska Jackson knows how to narrate a freaking book. And in this one, we follow Liz Lightly, who wants to get out of her very white town. She does not fit the societal mold that they have built for people in that town. She is very queer, and she is also a young black woman, so again, does not fit the mold of what this town has made. She has the perfect plan to get out of this town. In fact, she has applied for her dream college, she has applied for a nice scholarship, and that should really get her out of there. Except her plan does not go according to plan, and instead she gets denied the scholarship, and her only chance now is to run for prom queen, win prom queen, and get the prize that comes along with it, which is $10,000. That is what should help her really afford college. This story was just fantastic, and I definitely want to read more of Leah Johnson's work once her newest novel comes out this year, which is Rise to the Sun. Very much excited for that one to come out as well. But in this one in particular, I absolutely adored the dynamic between Liz and Mac, which is the love interest in this book and the person who becomes very, very close with Liz. I found their relationship evolving into friendship to a more romantic scenario. It was not only very wholesome, but it was a journey that Liz needed at the time. Not only because she needed a true friend alongside her, but also because she needed that excitement. She needed to figure exactly what her sexuality meant to her, and she needed that sense of freedom and acceptance that she had been seeking out for the majority of her life. And although the story was incredibly wholesome and hopeful, there were still some heartbreaking elements to this, like Liz's friendship with Jordan. I think that was probably the thing that definitely broke my heart to see these two friends that were so close drifting apart and walking opposite each other in the school hallways, and seeing kind of themselves drift apart and yearning to be as close as they once were, and seeing Liz form these new friendships and these new relationships. And I found so many great quotes on this one, just such an enjoyable story overall. There was such a tenderness in which Leah Johnson wrote this book with that just makes the reader be super engaged with the story. I find myself often drifting away from audiobooks. I think it's very hard for me to focus at times, even if I'm just now getting really into them. This one though, whether it was the narrator or the story itself, definitely keeps you gripped. It honestly just keeps getting better and better. Another graphic novel that I definitely had to mention in this one, because again, the definition of wholesomeness, a fast-paced read, an interesting story, beautiful illustrations, and very informative as well, which I was not expecting, and that is Fence by C.S. Packet. I now want to get more contemporary graphic novels. I feel like those are gonna become my absolute favorite thing, and I am here for it. Like, there are no complaints on my end. In Fence, we follow Nicholas, who is the bastard child of a very famous fencer, and Nicholas is trying to prove himself as a fencer as well, whether that is through his education or through competition. In fact, he has a half-sibling who goes to this very prestigious private academy, and he is constantly secretly, unknowingly to everyone else, living in his brother's shadow. Nobody knows that he is the bastard child of said fencer, so this is very much internal. It's this very internal competition that he has in order to prove himself to his father. And so he applies to this private school, which is the rival to where his brother attends, in the hopes of getting this big scholarship and making it into the fencing team to again compete against his brother. But there are a lot of moving parts to this. Out of it, obviously, competitions and rivalries arise, and it was just exciting. It was wholesome. It was very informative again with fencing. If you're like me and you are not in the slightest knowledgeable of this sport, this is so freaking cool to read because it tells you all of the different stances, all of the different attacks, so it doesn't leave you out in the blue with all of these terms, these fancy terms that it's using to explain the sport, but rather it explains everything to the reader, which I definitely appreciated because I had no idea what any of these things meant. The illustrations were also really freaking cool. Like, I just loved everything about this. The side characters were also really funny, and the dynamic between the two main characters here was also phenomenal. I cannot wait to see their story evolve. There is definitely a lot of rivalry there, but there is most definitely a sense of respect in that rivalry. They see each other and they see what the other could be, would be if they improved. So I cannot wait to see how the story evolves. Definitely need to get myself the rest of the series. This is most definitely, if not my favorite book that I have read in 2021. I was about to say 2020. We're in 2021, Mel. If this is not my favorite book that I have read this year, it is most definitely one of my favorite books that I have read this year. Audiobook, again, narrated by the author. I've been through this, and this is A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This one was a roller coaster of emotions that takes place in the span of 60 seconds. You heard it right, people, 60 seconds. Now, the audiobook is also fairly short. This is definitely one that I recommend you do through audio. And I say 60 seconds because we follow our main character, Will, and he has a gun in the waistband of his pants, and he is trying to claim justice for his brother's murder. After he witnessed his brother's murder and nobody doing anything about it, he takes it upon himself to claim justice to an injustice that happened in his life. And so as he gets on an elevator ride, a man on a mission, he goes up through all of the floors in this building in the span of 60 seconds in a very emotional ride, questioning whether or not he is making the right decision that could potentially alter his entire life. From seeing dead people getting onto the elevator and strange girls whacking away that smoke from that dead person's cigarette, he starts interacting with these imaginary people and trying to figure out exactly what path he should take. This book definitely explores a lot of different subjects like police brutality and injustice and corruption in the police force, but this also really talks about what it means for a young black kid to try and break out of something that he has been seeing and learning throughout his entire life and trying to break out of a pattern that is the one thing that he has known for, again, the entirety of his life, and how exactly he can break out of it when he is so used to seeing and hearing that that is the right thing to do. The story was so suspenseful and thrilling, and I was just constantly in awe at how Jason Reynolds weaves words together in such a quick string way, which makes the story so exciting yet all the more powerful. This definitely was such a ride to go on, and whenever I think about those big moments in the book, at him telling Buck, which is the dead person in the elevator, hold on Buck because it's a long way down, oh my god, do I get chills all over my body and I just want to burst into tears. Audiobook is super quick. I think I sped it up to like 1.5 or 2 times speed. Can't remember. I just know that I read this in the span of like an hour, and the way that I just burst into tears washing the dishes was insane. I constantly find myself wanting to reread this book. When I reread this book, it's because I'll have it physically and I'll be able to annotate. The next one, which is, I think, something that a lot of teenagers out there should be reading, or if you just enjoy YA and in general want to be mind-boggled, confused, if you want a great plot twist, if you want something that you would never expect out of a book that deals with a lot of darker issues but does all of them in a very respectful manner, but also in a way that will make you feel all of the things. Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson is that book. I recently uploaded an entire spoiler reading vlog on this book if you want to check it out if you have read the book. If you have not read this book, don't click on the video because I literally spoil the plot twist, so don't do that to yourself. In this one, we follow Claudia and Monday, who have been best friends for literally forever, 4 years now, and they are very much used to being attached at the hip friendship. And at their newest first day of school, Claudia arrives at school and she doesn't see Monday anywhere. And a few days go by and Claudia keeps waiting and looking and waiting some more. And she ends up figuring out that Monday is not coming back to school. And she also ends up figuring out that Monday is missing and nobody is making a big deal out of it. Not the teachers, not the students, and most certainly not Monday's family, because neither her mother or her sister April are providing any sorts of answers to Claudia. This one was a wild ride of events. I think it is meant to be a very confusing read. It deals with a lot of different timelines, and at the end it wraps up to answer all of your questions, but throughout the entirety of the read you'll probably find yourself confused until that very ending. I think around 50-ish pages towards the end, I feel that is when the whole story starts coming together and it finally lets you know what's really going on, what has really happened. I think the most important part of this book, but also the scariest part of this book, is all of the conversations surrounding the system and how it continuously fails young kids out there, and how it fails to provide not only safety but also answers for families and kids alike. It was scary to know that this happens in real life, and it was also insane to read about in such a raw way. I think Tiffany D. Jackson bears herself open and truly masters her craft at writing, because her stories just make you feel everything. There is not a single word wasted with these stories. And I think it was a testament to true and loyal friendship. Even though it might have toxic traits, it still is a very loyal friendship that both parties needed at the time. And again, it was a condemnation of the system and how it continues to fail, even though it has been known that it needs improvement, and specifically how it fails young Black lives out there. I think it was very much a fantastic read. We have Fourier by Jamile Sayed Mendez, and this is a story that I very much enjoyed at the time. I also read this before the book came out. I did read an arc of it, and this one is a sports romance YA. It's also contemporary. It is written by an Argentinian author, Argentinian main character, set in Argentina. So all of it was just phenomenal. In this one in particular, we follow Camila Hassan, who lives in Rosario, Argentina, and at home she is the perfect daughter, fulfilling every expectation, has all the great grades, does all her chores, but outside of her familial expectations and very much hidden, she does football on the side. She is a rising futbolera who people call La Furia, and that is what she truly passionately wants to do for a living. That whole part of the book was fantastic. I think the way that it establishes the conversation for feminism and creating a space for yourself was incredible. That part of the book definitely loved, and that definitely surrounds Camila as a main character. And then to that we have to add Diego, who is her childhood lover, crush, however you want to call it, who is actually her brother's best friend, and he is now a football star. He plays in the Juventus. He is a successful futbolero, and we kind of see him come into this relationship with Camila having almost like a savior complex. And although their relationship was super wholesome to read about, that was definitely a sort of escapism that Camila needed at the time, there are a lot of complexities to that relationship in particular. It is not as simple as meets the eye. So I definitely liked that aspect of the book, but more than that, I think it definitely paints the reality of living in a Latin American country, particularly in Argentina. But even then, as a Panamanian myself, I found myself nodding along to a lot of things that happened in the book that are not exclusive to Argentina, but again could apply to a lot of different Latin American countries. So I think the fact that it is not set in the US and we're talking about a character that has a lot of aspirations, who is definitely wanting to get out of this very unfortunate situation that she constantly finds herself in, made it an all the more immersive experience. I just absolutely loved every single bit of it. It was filled with culture and a lot of Latinx references. You can tell all of those cultural elements that it has are very much accurate, so I enjoyed all of it. And the last one on my list is actually one that I read and finished today, and it is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I read this per your recommendation, and let me tell you, was it incredible. The audiobook for this, if you are an audiobook person, look no more, because this audiobook has a full cast of characters, sound effects, a podcast element, and the narrators are out of this world. I was just gasping and nodding and being like, oh my god, no, throughout the entirety of the book. The audiobook is also fairly short. It's like 7 hours long. I did speed this up 2 times speed, so I read this in like 3.5 hours. So it did go by pretty quickly for me. I need more Courtney Summers. I am so happy I bought the project because I need more. And in Sadie, we have a missing girl on a path of revenge, which if you know me, it's one of my favorite things to read about. And this one is told half from the perspective of a podcast and half from the perspective of Sadie herself. Sadie is a person who most definitely hasn't had an easy life. She grew up raising her sister Maddie and absolutely providing for her in whatever way she could. She definitely had to grow up a lot faster than she could have. And again, because she finds herself providing so much for her younger sister, she almost takes up this parental role that she never should have taken at such a young age. And when Maddie is found dead, Sadie takes it upon herself to find out exactly what happened to her sister. The police investigation is very much muffled in this book, and answers are not being provided from any party. And so you can guess that Sadie embarks on this journey of revenge, trying to find her sister's killer. And then from the podcast end of it, we have West, who at a small gas station overhears a person talking about Sadie's case. And he finds it so interesting that this is going on that he takes it upon himself to cover this case in his podcast called The Girls. I think this is definitely the best audiobook I have ever heard, like in my life. The podcast felt very authentic. Every single little character that provided some insight to the podcast, its voice was unique. You felt like you were listening to a real podcast. You felt like you were listening to a documentary. The book definitely broke my heart, and I think that is most definitely the intention with this book. I don't think this was meant to be a light read at all. In fact, as far as YA thrillers go, this is definitely one of the darker ones that I have read. The tone of this is very dark, where at times it doesn't necessarily feel like YA, but I think that's what made the story so freaking exciting. By the end of it, I was just shedding tears. Like, water was leaking from my eyes by the end of this book. Like, the very last line and the music that followed, Courtney Summers just wanted to freaking rip my heart apart, stomp on it, and walk away smiling as if nothing had happened. It is not meant to be a comfortable book. It is very haunting and chilling and creepy at times. I think what makes the story so dauntingly heartbreaking is the fact that Sadie is so loyal to her sister. It's that sisterly devotion that really shines in this book. Sadie is willing to go to the ends of the earth to bring justice to what happened to her sister. Just seeing Sadie by herself go throughout this entire journey, the only word that I can use for this is insane. The feeling of dread was explained so well. Like, the picture was painted so perfectly. I know I'm talking mostly about feeling, but it's just because I don't want to give away any tiny part of this book. And with that being said, please do keep in mind that this book has trigger warnings for it. I did write them down, and they go along the lines of parental neglect, child sexual abuse, mentions and descriptions of substance abuse, and we also have pedophilia in here. And that's about as much as I want to say about this book, just because I feel it's best if you go into it knowing just a little bit. And those are all the books that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if you have any YA book recommendations for me. Let me know down below. If you have read any of these, please also let me know down below. I am always interested to hear you guys' thoughts. If you reached the end of the video, let's leave some dog emojis down below in honor of charming as a verb, because I think when I was crafting my list, the more I kept thinking about charming as a verb. I don't know why. I just felt like rereading the book. And if you have yet to subscribe, don't forget to do so down below for more bookish content. Again, I'm constantly uploading videos that I'm sure you do not want to miss. I am also live streaming throughout the week with lots of reading sprints Wednesdays and Fridays, and all of my social medias are also linked down below. I have an Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Amazon wishlist, and a coffee. All of those are linked down below always. You know where to find me. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.